Mariana. I have the pleasure of introducing Arlene to the group today. With over 25 years of experience, Arlene has an extensive background in architecture, construction, and project management in the commercial, retail, and hospitality industry. Arlene began a career in architecture and real estate development following the completion of her architecture degree at Carleton University. Arlene's entire career has centered around working with commercial clients to deliver them the real estate space they need. In the last 10 years with Colliers, she has grown the private sector business in Canada over 500%. Arlene is a natural leader who can motivate project teams and provide meaningful insight into technical issues. This skill set has allowed her to thrive in her new role as director. In late 2019, Arlene became part of the Diversity and Inclusion Executive Champions for Colliers North America to implement the vision to be an inclusive workplace. Last year, Arlene was awarded the Catalyst Honors 2020 Business Leader Award, which recognizes role models of workplace inclusion in corporate Canada. I'd like to welcome Arlene.
Thank you very much for that lovely introduction. Am I okay? Can you guys see my screen okay? And me?
Yes.
Great. I've always been what my mother calls headstrong, delivering comprehensive arguments on why I should be allowed to do one thing or another. And I remember putting my negotiation skills to the test. I was in grade 2, and it was fall registration for after-school programs. You see, I grew up in Bloor West Village in Toronto, a well-established family neighborhood composed of a mix of European immigrants and us. And I had gotten into a debate with my mother because she would not let me go to Polish class. She patiently explained to me that I was not Polish. And after pleading for what seemed like forever, I conceded and proposed an alternate solution: Maltese class. Frustrated, she simply said no. So I packed my portable record player, my 2 records, my doll, and I left the house. Now, I only made it to the end of the block because I was not allowed to cross the street, but my point had been made. And after a short time, my little brother strolled by and he casually asked me where I was going. And after a brief explanation and his clear disinterest in my plight, he asked me if he could have my bedroom. Quickly reassessing the situation, I made the decision to return home. I had shown them. And although I did not end up in Polish or Maltese class, I learned the power of agency, which is what brings us together today. International Women's Day. It's all about giving girls and women agency and the freedom and opportunity to choose, to control their cultural, social, political, and economic future. And ultimately, it's a call to action to accelerate equality and the freedom to choose a future full of possibilities, freeing both women and men from conventional definitions of who or what they should be. And although my first exploration of my agency did not quite work out as planned, Brownies was a solid runner-up. My name's Arlene Dedier, and I've worked in construction my entire career. I'm going to shamelessly tell the story of women in construction. First, I'll start with some facts. It might be a little bit dry, but it's very revealing. And then I'll go to the most unlikely place, interpreting this industry through my mirror and my lens and my history. First, I'd like to thank Colliers project leaders for giving me the space and time to speak here today, and a special thanks to OPWA's team for organizing this event and inviting me. So first, let's break down some facts very quickly. Male-dominated occupations are those that are comprised of 25% women or less. These industries are particularly vulnerable to reinforcing male stereotypes that make it difficult for women to excel. So just the facts. 37,058,856 is the population of Canada as of 2018. 61.3% is the number of women aged 15 and older employed in Canada. 12.1% is the number of women that work in the field of real estate and construction today. 7.9% represent white women in construction. 1.7% are Latinx. 0.7% are Asian. And less than 0.5% are Black. I'm a miracle. And unfortunately, my First Nations sisters are too few to be captured as a percentage. I'm here today to talk about the miracle of women in construction. You. I thought there'd be an imbalance in the construction industry, but the numbers represent a very difficult truth. There's been little progress over the last 25 years. And as of June 2020, Stats Canada, 1.46 million people work in the construction industry. 182,000 are women. 1.16 million work on site and 300,000 work off site. In real terms, this means for every 100 men on site, there are 4 women. Most women work off site in offices. And in fact, I do both as a project manager of major capital projects and a recovering architect. So how did we get here? I'm not a statistician, historian, or analyst. I am, however, a woman in construction. So what I'll do is hold a mirror to myself and tell my story with its own paradigms and explain my shifts. My hope today is that as I tell my story, you may see your story or your colleague's story, a neighbor's story, or our story, and together we can create a new history, and hopefully creating a reflection in the mirror through a new lens. So starting with paradigm shift in the most unlikely place, beginning with me. And my paradigm, I mean an overall concept accepted by most people in an intellectual community because of its effectiveness in explaining a complex process, idea, or set of data. Now, I'm intentional when I use the word paradigm because a stereotype is fixed and a paradigm can shift. So what if I told you that as dire as the state of women in construction sounds today, a shift is possible? And what if I told you that you could be the change agent that starts that shift? And what if all you had to do is to make one change today? Let me start my journey in the world of construction with my girlhood. One thing has remained constant in my life. I've always been Black and I've always been a woman. So first, the paradigm young Black female girl, my childhood. I was born in Port of Spain, Trinidad, and grew up in Toronto, Canada. And I was described as disengaged, distracted, disenfranchised, apprehensive, and withdrawn. And as a lower middle class immigrant child of divorced parents and dyslexic to boot, I heard, she tries hard, but it might be all too much for her. It's our recommendation, a teacher told my mother, that your daughter be streamed into a general program. But my mother refused to hear of it. But hearing disengaged, disenfranchised enough times, you begin to believe it. Withdrawn and disengaged? Yeah. So paradigm shift number 1, be defined by no one but yourself. I secretly became engaged, motivated, mindful, perceptive, and creative. How? I hatched a plan. In grade 13, my dance career. I started dancing when I was 6, and I'd spent months convincing my mother that I should take a gap year before university, to travel to Europe and secretly launch my dance career. And the simple fact was, I had no intention of returning to Canada. And as part of the deal, amongst many promises that I made my mother, including paying for my 6-month European adventure was that I'd complete all of my university applications. So I did. But really, what were my chances of getting in? Little to none. I remember a list like yesterday, calling home to tell my mother I wasn't going back to Canada. And she quickly told me to get home like bleeping yesterday. I'd been accepted to architecture school. What? I couldn't believe it, but I did. I got accepted to multiple schools. So I had to come home to attend Carleton University School of Architecture. And I picked that school because it was the farthest away from my mother, and I'd show her. But a funny thing happened. I was like a duck to water. And by the time I graduated, I was living in Rome, Italy, working with the Directed Studies Abroad program and doing an archaeological dig in the south of France in the off season. Paradigm shift number 2. Fear is air. And I danced with my fear. Fear of my teachers, my mother, my professors, the world. Architecture was the first thing I was really good at. Nominated by my peers and winning the Alpha Rho Chi Award in architecture, a North American blind competition. And my father's response to hearing I was becoming an architect? Why would you do that? You're young, you're Black, and a woman. Well, I'd show him. And so, yes, in my adulthood, I'm still a Black female. And I point this out because I'm often asked, what's it like being a Black female in construction? Which to me is an inane question. May I ask you, what's it like being you? In my adulthood, I was described as arrogant, aggressive, stubborn, impertinent, and opinionated. Sound familiar? So this is the paradigm. I'm setting up for a meeting. And at that time, I was a young intern architect. A man walks into the room and I'm nervous because I'm in charge of a major rollout for one of the big 4 banks in Canada. He sits down and asks if I can get him a coffee. I politely told him there was coffee outside, I think, because it wasn't my office. He then tells me how he likes his coffee. I continued setting up, and when the meeting convened and we had all introduced ourselves, he said, quite sincerely, "Oh, so you're the architect. Good for you. Great job." Paradigm shift number 3. Arrogant? No. Confident? Hell yes. Determined, focused, bold, and thoughtful. I left Canada in the late 90s and moved to Washington, D.C., and I practiced architecture there for almost a decade before moving to project management. And I went on to become the first Black president of one of the oldest real estate organizations in Washington. And during that time, I met an old, white, very rich developer from Virginia. And I had a paradigm about his type. And I was wrong. He became my mentor. Paradigm shift number 4, don't judge a book by its cover. I needed to learn to challenge with empathy. And he clearly knew privilege was invisible to those that had it, but felt it was his responsibility to do something with it. And he challenged me through guidance and empathy. He encouraged me to be more than I thought I could. To own real estate, to hold steadfast to my principles. He changed my paradigm of him. He changed my paradigm of myself. But that's a longer story. So my last paradigm and my most favorite, my primehood. Just letting you know, I'm still a Black female. Some may say I've become obstinate, but professional, outspoken, but sensitive, and very, very bossy. And for some, that may be true. Here's where I go back to the beginning. 2 things have happened to me since I've been back in Canada. I came to understand my father's words at hearing I was becoming an architect. You're young, Black, and a woman. Why would you do that? And here's my paradigm shift number 5. He was afraid for me when he said that. He saw the world through his lens. He saw barriers and injustice through his eyes and his mirror. And what he's come to know is that I'm tenacious, expert, strategic, diplomatic, and a leader. I work for a great company with amazing people. And the strangest thing happened last year. I had a young woman who works with me nominate me for an award. Now, you think of young people as people to teach, to mentor, and champion. And she and her girl gang of young women and men rallied my peers, our leadership, and they did a whole bunch of work for this submission. And I realized something. She was my promoter, and they were my champions. And the craziest part was, I won the 2020 Catalyst Canada Business Leader Award. Paradigm shift number 6, reach one and teach one. It's in all of us to do, to be the teacher, the mentor, the sponsor, the champion, the ally. No longer should men be judged on potential and women on past performance. So what can we do? Here are my 3 takeaways from the paradigm shifts. And as you hold the mirror up to yourself and you remember your story and my story, and now hopefully a new shared story, think of these. Fear is air. Dance with fear. Don't run from it. Embrace it. Challenge with empathy. Remember, it's okay to challenge old paradigms and status quo, but challenge with empathy. Teach one and reach one. It's our duty to each other to support our entire community, our children, our elders. You must reach one and teach one, be an educator, a mentor, a sponsor, a promoter, a teacher, a champion, an ally. The mirror's reflection is now clear for me. The paradigms have shifted and the lens is new. My name's Arlene Dedier and I'm a Black woman in construction. I'm a proud immigrant daughter of Canadian Trinidadians. I'm a headstrong, slightly flawed, wannabe dancing fashionista. I'm an aunt, sister, wife, colleague, friend. I'm a Colliers project leader. Essentially, I'm a builder of buildings, a builder of people, and hopefully, like you, a builder of the future. And my sincere hope is that you share the gift of agency with girls and women every day. Happy International Women's Day. Choose to challenge. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Arlene. We actually do have a couple of questions. So it's actually sad how little progress we have made. I graduated with the engineering degree in 1992, where there were 25% of the class that were women in our small class. Our society is still trying to get to that 25% target overall in engineering enrollment nearly 30 years later. How do we inspire girls to study engineering and other applied sciences?
I think that it's hard to be what you can't see. I think that we need to do things like this in a very broad range. The point of International Women's Day is to set a role model, not only for our peers, but those that are coming up in the world, you know, reaching out to schools and letting them know that these can be really engaging, inciting, and successful careers. So yeah, I think being a role model and reaching out to the community.
Excellent, thank you. Our other question is, what is Collier's diversity and inclusion program?
So Colliers has really taken a big move in diversity and inclusion. We established a program that addresses both internal training, education, policies, as well as building a champion network, ERGs, and leadership training. It's not the same being on the private sector side as it is on the government side. The government and public side has done a much, much better job than the private sector. I'm proud to say Project Leaders has a good split of work, because a lot of our work is in the public side of the business, but on the real estate side, not so great. So we're really being intentional with an action plan on how to move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. And last question I have for you is, has there been major changes arising in your business from the events of 2019 and 2020 to address women's issues or concerns?
In light of all of the actions, I think Keely's slide in the beginning has shown the momentous push forward of women in the industry. It's really made us take a hard look at ourselves. It's cracked something open that started a momentum. I want everyone to not yield to that momentum for change. You know, what we've done is we're measuring ourselves right now to set real targets that are aspirational and changing the way that we're thinking and having an open exchange and dialogue. We're doing events like this internally now, in podcasts, in interviews, and so it's beyond training. So I think that there's a lot of activity that's taking place. I think that there's action in how we hire and in how we're reaching out to schools and other groups. So I think that we have a long way to go, but we know the truth, and we're facing it. We're dealing with it as we move forward. Thanks, Tara.
I am totally going to cram one more question in. Sorry, Mariana. It just popped
That's
up.
all right. Go ahead.
It said somebody's asking, I went with everything they do. Thank you for your presentation, but how would you recommend someone build confidence as a professional and a female in a male-dominated field?
You know, it's funny. At the beginning of COVID, within the first week, I started to hold a group meeting with women in our company, and it started just in the GTA, and now we have a group of women from across Canada that join us for lunch. We were doing it weekly, and now I do it monthly. And in December, I talked to them about the difference between courage and confidence. Because a lot of people will say, Arlene, you're so confident, you're so confident. And you guys have heard part of my story, and I was not confident. You're not born with confidence, but you can learn to be courageous. And I think courage is something that you just have to say to yourself, why not? And it goes to the first part of my speech here was around agency. And what you need to know ultimately, even when you think, and I could tell stories, but even when you think you have no possible choice, you have agency. And it takes courage to say, why not? Why not me? And sometimes you have to say it to yourself. You just need to take a deep breath, take it in, and say what you need to do. And you get to the point and you move forward and you push through it. And that's how you are courageous, and that courage builds confidence. I hope I answered that question. I don't know if I did.
I think you did. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Arlene. This is great. I really love your paradigms, and you know, we all have to keep in mind not to judge by the cover. I love that. Somebody told me once, you know, not all Italians are expressive and not all women are amiable. I think it takes